I love reading Fortean literature and coming across cases and stories that are just completely bizarre. In this video, I will be discussing some of these accounts that I have collected. In Owensville, Indiana, citizens were puzzled one winter morning to find a cryptic message painted in huge letters on the sidewalk in front of the public grade school. The message said simply, "Remember Pearl Harbor." People commented on the message, but they did not know who put it there or why. It was really nothing to get excited about at the time it occurred, though, for the infamous Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor never took place until 2 years later, to the exact day. In September 1970, in Mount Vernon, Washington, Walker Ainsworth claims that he saw a peculiar sight about 2,000 feet above him. A huge object moving across the sky from north to south at about the speed of an airplane. Though, in his words, it didn't look like an airplane. So what did it look like? According to Ainsworth, it looked like a giant snowball. I have to admit, this is the first snowball UFO sighting I've ever heard of. Not the first weird story I've heard involving snowballs, though. In Cook County, Illinois, near Chicago, in January 1846, 2 boys noted only as the son of Mr. Groves and the son of Mr. Kirk were in a snow-covered open field when they were suddenly hit by a flurry of hard snowballs. The snowballs did not break up on impact and were apparently rising up out of the field like bullets. The boys went to get Mr. Groves, who came back with them to the field at dawn to investigate. They noted that there were no persons around when they arrived there, nor could they find anything to indicate that any other people had been there at all, aside from the 2 boys. They could find no other footprints in the snow. As they checked the area, the weird phenomenon started again. This time the attack, which appeared to be snowballs rising straight up from the open field and launching themselves directly at the 3 on their own, was much more violent this time around. Mr. Groves, who could not believe what he was seeing, was furiously attacked, as were the 2 boys. In fact, the Kirk boy was so severely injured that he succumbed to his wounds sometime later. I have to admit, that is the first time I've ever heard of a phantom snowball thrower. From snowballs to wrecking balls. In 1973, a 5-ton wrecking ball belonging to the Dowling Construction Company in Indianapolis, Indiana, suddenly vanished. Workmen had left it hanging 200 feet in the air from a crane. When they returned to the site the next morning, the crane was still there, but the ball was gone. In 1986, a broken-down bulldozer weighing several tons disappeared from the yard of a construction firm in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Since its engine was filled with sand, whoever accomplished the theft had to haul the huge machine away in an even larger machine, without leaving tracks or clues. In Newton, Utah, someone or something stole a whole barn while the owner was off on a trip. Curiously, this is not a one-off. Entire buildings have been reported as disappearing over the years. Prefab houses erected as summer homes were especially prone to house napping. Someone just moves in with a truck, disassembles the house, and carts it away. But stone houses have also vanished in this fashion, as have steel bridges, entire railroad trains, and airplanes. Noted researcher and author John Keel posited the notion that possibly ufonauts were responsible for some of these object napping shenanigans, and it didn't end with just structures vanishing, but people and animals also. He also wondered if they were responsible for some of the monsters people were reporting. He often noted a correlation between UFOs and lake monster sightings, he found it curious that when lake monsters or sea serpents were reported, UFOs were almost always sighted in the general vicinity at that time. Could it be that UFOs are dropping off these creatures and retrieving them at a later date, for whatever reason? Are the UFOnauts also responsible for the out-of-place animal sightings that are reported? We've all heard stories of animals being found in areas of the world they are not known to thrive in. Kangaroo sightings in New Jersey, whales found in jungles, etc. In July 1962, Reuters reported on an absolutely bizarre case from the village of Ayo in Bolivia. It might just back up some of Keel's theories. Manuel Orozco, the mayor of the small village, contacted government officials claiming that on the night of June 30, 1962, a strange metallic object was seen in the sky and appeared to fall into a nearby ravine. The following day, a strange animal appeared in the area. Villagers killed the animal with sticks and stones and then, apparently, ate it. U.S. Air Attaché Colonel Paul Weimer bought the remaining skin off the villagers. It was later identified as a puma, a big South American cat, not normally found on the Bolivian high plateau. Orozco, his 20-year-old son, and many of the villagers watched the flying object, and they were convinced that the puma had arrived in it. They noted that it appeared to be tame, or possibly dumbfounded by the change of climate. U.S. Ambassador Ben Stefanski asked the Bolivian Air Force to investigate, but they claimed to have found no trace of the downed object. On October 26, 1956, Mrs. Faye Swanson of Stanford Drive, Broadmoor, California, stepped out into her backyard at 8:05 a.m. and found the body of a small, furry monkey that had fallen out of the sky during the night. The body had struck her clothesline with such violent force that a solid 4x4 post had splintered. A spokesperson for the San Francisco International Airport said that no airliner had been transporting monkeys during the night. No authority from any organization could offer any explanation for the origin of the dropped monkey, and the San Francisco Chronicle headlined the question, "Who's throwing monkeys at the Earth?" It seems that the UFOnauts might very well be zipping around our skies with houses and animals, and in the case of Mrs. Swanson, dropping them off from great heights. Though more frightening is the prospect of them snatching up people. In one early case, 2 pilots were apparently snatched up and never returned. In July 1924, Flight Lieutenant W.T. Day and Pilot Officer D.R. Stewart took off in their single-engine plane for a routine 4-hour-long reconnaissance flight over a war-torn area of the Middle East, known as Mesopotamia. The flyers failed to return, and a search party was sent out after them. The next day, searchers located the plane parked in the desert. It was in perfect condition. The craft had not been shot down. Gasoline was in the tank, and the engine turned over as soon as it was started, though Day and Stewart were nowhere to be found. Searchers found it odd that they had chosen to land in such a barren stretch of desert, but the longer they examined the scene, the more bizarre things continued to get. Apparently the pilots had landed and jumped out of the plane. Their footprints showed that the men had left the plane and walked along, side by side, for about 120 feet. Then, while still standing next to each other, the men simply stopped and vanished. Their tracks went no further or in any other direction, almost as if they had been sucked up into the sky. A half-dozen patrols of desert tribesmen, soldiers in armored trucks, and planes searched the area, but no trace of the men was ever found.